we go. All right. So everything from this point on will be recorded. Yes?
A quick question. So,
Yep.
when we're using the, when we are using the, when we're using the list view, you know, like, where you have two separate lists, can you actually make it that on another screen that basically combines into one list, or
Okay, what do you mean by combine into one list? What you're combining what into one list?
Okay, so the thing is that, well, once they make the choice, I can move the items over that they want. Can you take that one list that has got all the choices off the person? Like, let's say they want like 4 classes. Can you take that one list and basically put it into another screen that's got all the items listed, or would you have to turn that into a Firebase and say, okay, now take it out of the database?
You append, right?
No. Okay, so in case you have a user go in and take 4 classes, okay, and then move them over using the arrow.
Okay.
Okay, so then once you move them over, you actually want the next screen to say, these are the choices that you have made.
Okay.
Would you have to use Firebase for that, or can you actually do it?
Okay, I only have one thing to suggest. The solution of the previous homework assignment. Okay? Because you're trying to do something that can be done using the very same mechanism, and only half of the mechanisms of that particular homework to get it done.
You know one where we have to divide.
Yeah. Which doesn't seem to have anything to do with what you want to do, but it actually does have everything to do with what you want to do. Okay? So I will leave it up to you to explore that for at least for a little bit. I'll let you, do the slow cooking for a while. If you cannot get it done, then I'll give you a little more clue. Okay? But it really is there. Okay? So I want you to explore that option a little bit first. Okay, so we'll continue from last time, but the first thing I want to do is to show you something that is interesting about lists. Okay, we have been dealing with lists a lot, so you can expect the next exam, which is going to be next Wednesday, okay, to have something to do with lists. Okay, but this one is something that is a little bit harder for people to anticipate because it is, well, it's just kind of strange. Okay. And it keeps asking me to confirm all of these things. Don't ask me again. All right, so I'll just start a new project here. I just call this a test list. Okay, the name already exists. Test list 1. Okay, and it's a pretty simple application. I just need to have a few labels, like 3. Okay, so I'm just going to drag 3 labels here because I want the labels to display certain things. I need a button to trigger an action. That's all I need as far as the user interface components are concerned. Then we move on to the blocks, and we'll start off with the screen initialization trigger, and then we'll go ahead and create, I would say, a few global variables. So we'll have several global variables, named, to be exact, 3 of these. So the first one, I'll just call it level 1, LVL1, and then we have a level 2, and then we have a level 3. All of these will be initialized to an empty list. Okay, actually, it doesn't really matter how we initialize these things. I can put a 0 into every single one, because initialize as an event handler is actually going to do all the initialization. So they can be initialized to any value as a global variable, but the actual action to initialize is going to be here. All right, so we'll set the global variables here. Level 1 is going to be a nested list. Okay, it's going to be the top level list. So it's pretty easy to do it. We can just make a list and duplicate it twice, just to make it more interesting. Okay, there we go. And then along each level, I just need a number for the first item. The second item is the actual list. So we'll go to math, just give it some numbers. If you want to, you can make this one. We can start with 100 here, okay? Just to be sure that the index and the value are way different. So this way we don't have any confusion. Second one is 200, and the third one is 300. Okay. Whoops. There we go. So we have a 300 here, and depending on what you want to do, this slot here can be another number. Yeah, why not? We'll just stick a 400 into this spot here. All right. So the way I initialize level 1 is not exactly exciting, because all I'm doing is creating a list that has 2 items. The second item of the top level list is a list by itself. It also has 2 items, of which the second item is another list. It also has 2 items. Okay, so it's just a nested list, nothing too exciting. Then I'll initialize level 2. So I'll go ahead and well, I can do a duplicate. Yes. Okay, so this is level 2, but level 2 is not going to be a list like this. I just toss this away. Instead, I will say level 2 is a part of level 1. So I'm going to use select list item using this block and say level 2 is actually one of the items of level 1. Okay, we'll go ahead and select level 1 as the list that we are starting off with, and we want to supply the index. The index has to start with 1, so if we want a second item, we put a 2 here. So we put a 2 as the index. There you go, just like that. Level 3 is going to be a subcomponent of level 1. So I will just go ahead and duplicate this block and say I want to initialize or set the value of level 3 to be basically the same thing, but it's going to be a component of level 2. All right? So are we okay in terms of these concepts? Okay. The big question is level 2 independent from level 1 once I set the variable? And is level 3 independent from level 2 and level 1? In other words, if I make changes to level 3, is it going to impact level 2 and level 1? That's the question, okay? Because in this class, we haven't really talked about passing by reference or some high-level concepts like that. This is probably the first time we encounter something that is kind of difficult to explain, at least on the surface, okay? But I'll explain that, once we get the program up and running. All right. So given this, I am also going to write a small procedure. Doesn't do a whole lot of interesting stuff. All it does is to display level 1, level 2, and level 3 in the labels. That's all it's going to do. So we go to label 1 and set the text value of label 1 to the value of the global variable level 1. So label 1 maps to level 1, label 2 maps to level 2, and so on. So we get level 1, and then we just have to replicate this twice to get to the other 2 global variables. So duplicate, and we want level 2 to display label 2 to display level 2, label 3 to display level 3. Okay, nothing too mysterious. We have done this before. Okay, and then we just have to change the name of the procedure to display lists. And we call that inside the initialize function so that we can get an idea of, okay, what do they look like? Okay, just make a call here. So now we have a call to a procedure with the name of display lists. Okay, so up to this point, well, everything doesn't seem to be too mysterious. We should be seeing, if you look at the way we initialize level 1, we should be seeing open paren 100, open paren close 200, open paren 300, 400, close parentheses. That should be that's what we should see with level 1. Level 2 is going to be just because it's based on the second item of level 1. That means we should see open paren 200, open paren 300, 400, close paren. And then level 3, because it's based on level 2, it is going to be just open paren 300, 400, close paren. Okay, so at this point, I think that's what we should be seeing. Let's test the program first before we actually add any code to the button to do changes. So we will do it the long way, which means we go to my Android SDK folder, go to Tools, we run Android to bring everything up to date. And this is actually outdated already. Android Studio is superseding this particular tool. It still works, it's just that Android Studio is the current tool set supported by Android. This is kind of like the older version. For what we're doing in this class, it's not a big deal, okay? But when we transition to 363, we'll definitely use Android Studio, which is already in version 2. So that's a kind of a mature product already. So we go to Tools, we manage ABD, and then we start up this particular virtual machine, and then we just launch it. So as we're launching the virtual machine, it complains about certain things. It's not 100% needed, I don't think. All right. So getting back to what I wanted to do, show you earlier. Let me increase the exposure because the paper is a little bit brighter. Okay, that's too bright. There we go. And I just need a regular pen. Okay. So level 1 should look like this. Open paren. Huh. Is that working out okay or not? Yeah. Yes? Okay. We can make it a little bit bigger too. See, this I cannot do with a regular whiteboard. I cannot just zoom in like that. But I cannot copy and paste using this mechanism. Okay, so level 1, this is LVL1, is going to be 100. And then the second item of level 1 is a list by itself, starting with 200. And then we have another list starting with 300 and then 400. Close, close, close paren. This is what it should display with label 1. Label 2, which is reflecting the value of level 2, is everything from here to here. That's level 2. Level 3, LVL3, is everything from here to here. But the biggest question is level 2 actually referring to a part of level 1, or is level 2 making a copy of a part of level 1? That's the question. Okay? So we are not going to test that particular thing at this point. What we will do instead is we are going to use the virtual machine just to get it up and running first. And then we get the APK file from the app. Okay, so we scroll up a little bit, build, give me an APK file. Just to confirm that we displayed the items that they're supposed to be displayed. So getting back to my notepad here, oops, that's the wrong one. There we go. So getting back to here, level 2 should display 200, open paren 300, 400, close paren. And then level 3 should display just 300, 400 in parentheses. Okay. All right, so we'll save the file and then switch to the command line so that we can upload the code. And the first thing we need to do is, I need to change to the other folder first. So let's do that. I'm in root, not good idea. Okay. So we first need to run adb start server. And then we run adb devices just to make sure the virtual machine is attached. It is attached. Then we can go ahead and install -R for reinstalling if the app is already there. And the program is called test list 1, and we have the APK file in the temp folder. Just press the enter key. It gets uploaded to the emulator and is now installed. Switch back into the emulator. And we should see that over here as test list 1. Okay, click it, and that's exactly what we see. Okay, so if you compare this to what is on the piece of paper, they match exactly. Okay, so there are no surprises here. Are there any questions at this point? No questions? This is all good? All right. So we'll continue with this program to do something that is a little bit more fun. What we'll do is we'll attach some code to the button so that when the button is clicked, we are going to increase the number. Switching back to the list here, what I'll do is I want to, every time I click the button, I want to increase this number by 1. So it'll be 400, and then 401, 402, 403, and so on. So I want to see if all the labels get updated at the same time, or whether only the global variable that I'm working with is going to be updated. Okay, so we'll go ahead and do this. This is also a good demonstration of how to make changes to items in the list. So this particular test program is serving multiple purposes. All right, so I'm just going to use level 3 because level 3 is closest to the number that I'm working with. So I'm going to go to lists here and say I want to replace a particular item in the list. The list that is being affected is going to be level 3, which is a variable, a global variable. So level 3 is the list where an item is getting changed. The index of the item that I want to change is 2 because it is the second item of that list. And the way I want to replace it with a value that is 1 more than what it already has. So that means I have to go to math again and do the add. And this is the part where it is kind of tedious to write in blocks, but the idea is actually pretty simple. Because the first thing I need to do is to grab the value of the same list and the same index. So this way I'm retrieving the current value of the second item of the list in level 3. And I just want to add 1 to it. So we go to math, we put a 1 in here. All right, so this is what we want to do. But we also want to make sure that we reflect the current states of all the lists in the labels. So we have to call display lists after this action is done. Are we okay with this program so far? Does everybody understand what I'm trying to test and what I'm trying to demonstrate? Okay, so let's give it a try. So what we'll do is we are going to build again, and then we'll upload and install the APK again. How long it takes depends on how many other people are building their apps, worldwide. So that's why sometimes it's really fast and other times it's not. So we'll go ahead and replace the APK file, switch back into the command line, and then just up arrow and then press enter key to reinstall the app. Go back to the emulator and then restart the application. Okay, this part has not changed. So when we click the button, we can see that all of them get updated. So that means when you say that a particular variable is a subcomponent of a list, it is actually referring to the original thing. Okay, is that okay so far or not? Okay. All right. So getting back to the notepad, what that means is level 1, LVL1, is referring to the entire thing, which can also be a part of another list. Okay. LVL2 is actually just referring to, hey, I'm responsible for this part. And then LVL3 is just referring to this part here. In other words, even though I have 3 variables and they are quote unquote, they're all lists, there's only one actual list that is being stored. Level 2 is not a list that is independent. It is really just a subcomponent of level 1. And in level 3, same thing, it's just a subcomponent of level 2. So we really only have one single list. I just have different variables set to different components of the same list. Is that concept okay? Because you can definitely think in either directions, okay? When we say that level 2 is a subcomponent of level 1, you can think, okay, maybe it's making a copy of that component. So now level 1 and level 2 are completely independent, but that is not the case. Are we okay with these concepts? Okay. So in a way, it is kind of like passing by reference because, I think, well, since cisp300 is a prerequisite of this class, I think for most classes in cisp300 by now, the concept of passing by reference should be discussed already. So that's why this is related to passing by reference. All right. So with this concept down, we are going to go back to the previous program that we were working on. Remember the program that I want to use where you click on something, it will expand it and show you the options for that particular option. Everything is organized in a hierarchical list. So we'll go back to that one and see what we can do to implement that program. So switching back to that program, we have to go to My Projects again, and it is Swipe List. The name of the project is called Swipe List. Okay. And let's double check again. Go to Blocks, and we have a pretty big list here that is initialized. So if you look at the way it's initialized, it is kind of the same type of initialization that I was demonstrating earlier. Basically, we have a hierarchical list of items. That's basically what it is. Do we have any questions at this point? Okay, no questions? All right. So if there are no questions, what we'll do is we are going to write the code to actually figure out what are the options at each level. And then we also want to introduce the mechanism to keep track of the levels that we are in, because we can drill all the way down to the 3rd level using this mechanism. But the first thing is I want to go through this list and then at the top level and figure out what my choices are. Okay, that's the first thing I want to do. And in each list, the first item is the identifier of the option, and then the rest is basically sub items that we can have under that particular top item. Is that okay? So you can kind of look at the first item as the name, and then the rest are the options for that particular name. Are we doing okay so far? Okay, all right. All right. And to do that more effectively, I think what I really should do is to change the way this thing is structured. So instead of making the two components in the same list, it is better off if I do some. Oops, I don't want to do that. That is what I want to do. And I put a list here that basically would store the options. So this is a better way to to do what I intend to do. These are okay. Okay, I think these are okay, and I have to make a similar change over here. Take these two out, but not completely out. I'm not removing those. I'm just replacing it so that the second item is the actual quote-unquote value, which is a list of all the possible options. So I'm just making a slight change to the structure of how I want to represent the available options and stuff like that. And I just want to make sure that everything else is okay here. Okay, so that's fine. Okay. All right. So the first thing I need to do is to say, okay, give me a list, and I will go ahead and initialize all the elements of a particular list view with the available options. Okay, that's the first thing I want to do. And since I'll be using that a lot, so I don't want to implement that logic into an event handler. Instead, I want to implement that feature into a subroutine, into a procedure. So this way I can reuse the procedure again and again and again. Okay. So we'll go ahead and define the procedure first, and then we'll make use of the procedure. So the procedure is going to have a result, which is going to be a list of the options. So I'll say make options, and it will take at least one parameter. The first parameter is going to be the list that is representing what options are available in a hierarchical form. So I'll just call this one, option tree, because it kind of looks like a tree, except it's put in a sideway. And then the second option, or the second input or parameter, is going to be, let's see, I don't need a second option. I don't need a second input, because the first one, the output is going to be a list anyway. So I can just use that output to initialize the elements of a list view. So we're fine here. We will definitely need to use a local variable. So we'll go ahead and stick the local variable block in here. We have to go through many items in this list. So we'll need a loop. So that means we need to go to control and say that we are going to do something that will end up with a result. So now we have these kind of basic blocks done here. The variable, there will be multiple variables. One is going to be the result. The result is going to be a list, so I just want to call that result list, which is also what I want to use to pass back to whoever is calling this subroutine. That's the purpose of result list. To initialize, it's really a good idea to keep everything initialized. So this way, I just say, okay, let's make it an empty list. Okay, we'll start with no options available. As we discover, options, we'll add to this list. The do part here is going to specify the actual logic of going through the option tree and then say, okay, what options do we have? So we'll go ahead and do this part here. The first thing we'll do is we have to set up a loop to go through all the options. There are two ways to do this. If you already know this is going to be a list, you can use a particular control structure for each. This particular one. This one can only be applied. Let me scroll this up a little bit, because I think people in the back may not be able to see this. So this particular block says run the blocks in the do section for each item in a list. So that means you have to give it a list to begin with. But since we already know that we are dealing with a list and option tree, which is going to be a list, this is the one that I can use. Okay. So we'll pick out this one. Okay. Which list are we talking about? Option tree is going to be the list. So we're going to use option tree as the list that we're going through, and then for each item in that list, we want to do several things. If you look at the way we initialize this particular structure, it is a list of key value pairs. Okay, the overall thing is a list, and then if for each item it has a key, which is just basically a number here, and then the value is by itself a list, and once again it has a value. Excuse me, it has a key and a value, and then the value itself has a key and a value. So we are just nesting that concept, in our option tree. So getting back to the subroutine or the procedure, now we kind of know, what we can do with this, because for each item, the first item is always going to be the key, which is what you want to display in the list view, so that you can say, okay, I want to click on this option, or I want to click on the other option. So what we'll do is we are going to add an item to result list. So add item to result list. And the item that we are adding is going to be the first item of this item here. Okay, it's going to be the first thing of that item. So then we go to select an item from a list. But this list is going to be item because an item is a key value pair, which is by itself a list. We are selecting the first item because the first item is the key, which is going to be what is going to be displayed. Okay, so there we go. We are done with make options. Okay, so make options once again assumes that the input or parameter option tree is a key value pair list. Okay, it can be nested, but it will only do it at the top level. For each option at the top level, it will retrieve. It will take a look at each item, and then for each item, it will assume the first item is what we want to display in the list view. It will just extract that one and then put it into result list. So every time we get one of those things, result list gets one longer. And then the end result that we are returning is really just a list of all the possible options. Okay. So we'll take a look and see, whether this works or not, and we'll attach that code into the initialize screen part so that the left list view start with something to begin with. Okay. I don't think we need level 1 list and level 2 list, so we'll go ahead and get rid of these two. Instead, we'll call the procedure initialize so that list view 1 start with some options. So we go to list view 1, and then we set the elements of list view 1 to the result of calling the procedure that we called a little bit earlier. And I don't think we'll need a top level list because we have the logic to do that already. So this block here is not needed anymore. So we'll toss it away. Instead, we'll make use of the procedure that we just wrote called make options. And then the option tree is going to be my global variable list of numbers. So we say get global variable list of numbers. And it should do exactly the same thing as before, as what it did on Monday at the end of the class. Except this time, we have a procedure that can be used again. So we'll go ahead and, oops, wrong scroll bar, build the APK file so we can upload it and test it. Are there any questions at this point? Well, while it is building, let's switch back to the notepad here. And we'll switch to the next page. I like the fact that I don't need to erase the whiteboard anymore. And we'll go ahead and save the file first. Okay, so basically what we have here is the overall thing is a list. Okay, so we'll start from here, and let's say we end here. It consists of only 2 items. It has one item, which is a list by itself. The second item is a list by itself. The first item of each list, sublist, is a number. So the first one starts with a 1, the second one starts with an 8. But the second item of this list is by itself also a list, like that. Each item within this list is a list value pair. I'm running out of space, so I'm not going to use the line feed thing. The first one is here, has a value of 2. The first one here has a value of 9. But then the second item is by itself a list. It is also a key value pair list. So we have 3, 4 as one thing here. And then we have 5, 6 as the other thing here. Let me see if that's the case. Because I might have messed up the... Okay, 2, 3, 4. Oh, okay, I see. So 2, 3, 4 is going to end the 2. And then 5, 6, 7 goes here. 5 is the key, and then the value is a key value pair of 6, 7. But there's only one. There you go. Okay. Oops. I wasn't displaying the correct, window. So this is the structure. The second part is not done yet, But the first part has the structure of that being, everything is key value pair list, okay? So that's why we can use the same logic over and over again to discover what options do we have and so on. Okay, so let's go ahead and upload the program and then test it. So this time we are dealing with, let's see, what is the name of the code? Swipe list, .apk, and then we switch back to the emulator. We don't need this app anymore, we just close it, and then we switch to swipe lists, which is here. This is the new version. You can see, well, I guess not. It's displaying 1 and 8 here. Okay, so in other words, screen initialize is working. What I wanted to do is, if I click on 1, it will show me the sub options available of 1 and display on the right hand side. That's what I wanted to do. Is that okay? Let me fix these font size first, so this way we can actually see what options are being displayed. So we want the font size, text size to be 22 is not large enough. We want it to be much bigger, like 44 maybe. And then the second one, the same thing, set it to 44. So this way we actually display the text a little bit larger. All right, but that part is just cosmetics. We already know that it is working. So now what we want to do is we want to attach code to list view 1 after picking, because we want to select the options based on what is clicked or what is selected and display those options in list view 2. Okay. All right. So now we have a little bit of a problem. Well, not initially, but later on we'll have a problem, just not right now. Okay. So right now we are hard coding everything. So list view 1 is always looking at things from the top level perspective. So that means it's not too difficult to figure out what the options are available to display in list view 2. Okay. In fact, I can use one huge nested block to get it done. So what we do is we look at list view 2 and we say set its elements to the following. Question? Okay. To the following, and it's going to be based on make options. So we duplicate this block, stash it here. But this time, I don't want to make options out of the root of the entire thing, out of list of numbers. That's not what I want to do anymore. It is still related to list of numbers, okay? But this time we have to go to list all the list blocks and scroll kind of all the way down, because we want to use the key value pair thing to look up a particular item. So we want the last block here. We want to look up the pairs is going to be my global variable list of numbers. Not found, well, we can just use not found, but we know the key has to be here. The key is going to be the value that is the first item of each key value pair. Where do we get that? In other words, if I look at the app here and I click on the 1 here or click on the 8 here, how do I know this is 1? I don't need to know the index. I want to know the actual value that I'm clicking on. It's one of the properties of a list view. Let's go back to the list view options and see which one may be helpful in this case. So we go back to list view here, and there are two items here that are kind of similar, but they're definitely different. One is selection, and the other one is selection index. Selection index is reporting the position of the item that you have selected, but not the actual value or not the actual text that is in that selection box. The other one, which is selection, is going to give you the value of the thing that you have selected, but not the index, not the positioning of that thing of the entire list. That's what we need. Okay? So we are going to pick out, we're going to use list view 1.selection to help us identify what is the key that we are searching for in the list of pairs, which is the global variable list of numbers. Now, this is not going to be useful, because once we select the one, there's no swiping capable yet. Okay, we cannot do the swiping yet. but at least it will update list view 2 based on what you select in list view 1. Okay, which is one big step to what we want to accomplish. It's not the entire thing, but we're one step closer. Okay, so now we'll go ahead and rebuild the APK. Okay, so we rebuild the APK. Wow, this time it's really fast. It's already 100% done. Now when do I get my APK file? I think I can resize the screen just a little bit to display edge to edge. Auto setup. Slightly better. We're still waiting. Well, since we're still waiting, we can switch back to the virtual whiteboard thing. So do you guys like this idea, or do you think it's not as good as using the whiteboard? It's better? All right, cool.
Plus it's on the screen here, and we don't have to write what you're writing on the whiteboard.
Yep.
If we see the video, we've got it here.
Yep, that's the whole idea. That's my original idea. I don't like the smell of the whiteboard markers either. Okay, it just kind of irritates me. I know it's not fatal. The amount that I'm inhaling is not fatal, but it just kind of bothers me. This one, there's nothing like that, and I get a hard copy of everything afterwards as well. All right, so we do have the file here. We just download it, overwrite the original, and then go back and re-upload the file. Okay. And then we switch back to the emulator just to give it a try, give it another spin. Okay, see, the text is much bigger this time, 1.8. So if I click on 1, okay, based on what we see on this side, if I click 1, what should I see in list view 2, which is the one to the right hand side? 2 and 5, very good. Okay, so we should see 2, 5 on the right hand side. If I click 1, if I click 8, it should be probably a 9 and a 12. Okay, yeah, because the distances between the numbers should be the same. So we click on 1, and it shows 2, 5. If I click 8, it shows 9, 12. Which is what I want, okay? So we are definitely closer to what we want to do. But eventually what I want to do is if I click on this 9 here, I want everything to move or shift to the left-hand side. So I want the 9, 12 now to be on the left-hand side, and then whatever option 9 allows is going to be on the right-hand side. So I want it to do this because I cannot do swiping, but if I can do this, I'm getting closer to what I really want to accomplish, which is drilling down a tree of available options until I get to the very end. Is that okay? All right. Okay. So what we need to do now is to say, okay, once we click on this 9, in the code, I should no longer be using list of numbers as the quote-unquote tree of options. I should be using a sub-part of it. And that's why we have the discussion earlier of when you make a variable a sub-list or a part of another list, you're not losing the original one. You just have another way to get into a portion of the overall list. Okay, so that's why we had that discussion earlier. Okay, all right. So what we want to do here is now we want to say, okay, let's attach some code to list view 2. Okay. So we go to list view 2, pick out its after picking event, and say, okay, if I pick something from list view 2, I want to do something about list view 1, and then eventually list view 2 also. Okay. Assuming that we don't need to backtrack, in other words, assuming we don't need to go back to an earlier option, which we want to do, but later on, okay? Assuming we only want to go forward until we drill down to a particular option, and we don't need to go back, anymore. We can do something that is relatively destructive, okay? I'll just go ahead and do that destructive thing, right now, okay? Because the destructive thing is we are going to change the global variable that we call list of numbers. Okay, we'll change that one. So we will use set the global variable list of numbers to a subcomponent of that thing. Okay, and the subcomponent is really the same thing as what we did earlier, which is based on let's see, lookup pairs. Okay, so we're going to take this one, and then we right-click, duplicate. I suppose I can use the backpack within the same application. And I can toss this, scroll all the way down, and go to the backpack, and drag this one over here. Yay, that works. So this way, it's easier for me to move or copy components across the screen, because you won't have a problem like what I do here, because I'm limiting the screen resolution and it's also kind of zoomed in. So that's why I'm out of screen space pretty quickly. Okay, but let's take a look at what we have done here. Okay, it's destructive because I would be losing the original list of numbers, because now list of numbers is referring to a part of its old self. There's no way to go back to the original self anymore, because nobody has a reference to the overall list. List of numbers as a global variable can only access a sub-portion of what it used to have. Okay, which is not a problem at this point, because we just want to be able to move forward. Okay, so after list view 2 has picked something, I am going to use that to help me find out, okay, so what are we going to how should I put it? Which is what is going to be list of numbers at this point, and then based on that we are going to set the elements of list view 1 and also list view 2. Okay, so let's go back to the application just so that we know what we're supposed to do. So I want to click on this 9 here. So 9, 12 become the list over here. And then whatever 9 has as an option will now display on the right-hand side. That's what I wanted to do. Okay. So this is the correct thing to do. Okay, because that will set list of numbers to be the list of key value pairs, starting the first one with 9 and then the second one with 12. So this part is correct. Then we have to replicate the code from the initialization, which is this one here. We say, oh, I don't need to do this. I can, okay. Let's see, add to backpack. Yep, there we go. And now we can go to the backpack and put it over here. Okay. So this way I changed list view 1 accordingly. But once I change list view 1 accordingly, let's see, what should I do about list view 2? Then nothing should be selected in list view 2, so we'll go to list view 2 and initialize it to nothing. So set the elements to an empty list, because nothing is selected at that point. So we should make it an empty list, and that should update the screen accordingly. Okay. All right, so let's check whether this works or not. Okay, so I'm actually working on this really, really incrementally. We go back to build and build up the APK. Are there any questions about this particular app at this point? The backtracking part is going to be the interesting part. Is once we drill down and then we're like, no, that's not what I want. I want to go all the way back to the beginning. How do we do that? What if I don't want to go all the way back to the beginning? I just want to go back a few times, okay? So that becomes an interesting problem by itself. So we'll save this one, upload it, just to make sure that we can, in fact, drill down to details first. Then we'll worry about how do we backtrack, later on. Okay, so the app is installed. Go back to the emulator, test it again. So I click 8, it displays 9, 12. If I click on 12, then we have a problem because bad arguments to select list item. The operation select list item cannot accept the arguments 13, 1 because when we look at how things are initialized, messaging, go back, there we go. Okay, so when we look at how things are initialized, we are running out of options already. In other words, some items that should be a list is not really a list anymore. In the app, I think I selected 9, right? And 9 has a list where 10 is the key and 11 is the value. It is no longer a list. That is the problem. It is no longer a list. So we can tackle this problem with a few options. Okay, so given this is what it is, I'm going to go to my notepad here and just reflect it. Okay, so we know that 9 is associated with a list of key value pairs. Well, in this case, only one key value pair, where the key is 10 and the value is 11. And then the next one is 12, which is the key, and then the value is going to be a list of key value pairs, but there's only one item. And the key in this case is 13, the value is 14, close, close, close. Okay? So when we select 12 as an option, it should display 13 as the only available option. Okay, but it's not doing that because, okay, let's go back to the emulator, just run it one more time so that this way we can see the error message. So we go to swipe lists, we select 8, so that means if we are selecting this option, it displays 9 and 12 as the possible options, because 9 and something is one key value pair, and 12 and then something else is another key value pair. We just pick out the 9 and the 12 as possible options. If I pick the 9, it should go here and say that 10 is an option, and it should not be a problem. When we click 9, there's no problem, okay? But when we click 9 here, it should go into this list of key value pairs and figure out that 10 is the only option. And this is where it crashed, okay? It complains about select list item. The operation select list item cannot accept the arguments, which is a 10, which is a list, and 1 is a list as well. The square brackets, I think, are indicating those things are lists. So that might have something to do with how select list item has a problem.
Could it be because instead of it being 10-1, it should be 10-11? So if it's thinking that it's a 1, it's just bringing this entire list back into itself?
Okay. Okay, so let's track down where the problem can possibly be. We got that problem when we clicked on list view 1 after we select an item. So we go to list view 1 after picking. It's triggering the execution of this code here. We have tried to set list view 2 elements to something based on make options. And we are trying to look up in pairs using the item that we have selected in list view 1 as the selection. That is correct. We are trying to use list of numbers as the list of pairs, which in this case, if I go back to this whiteboard here, the list of pairs is supposed to be this thing here. This is my list of pairs. Now, it only has one item as the list of pairs, but it should still be okay. And if it's not found, it just reflects not found. So I don't think the problem is occurring here, because otherwise it would have complained that it is because of lookup in pairs that has a problem. But it said it's the selection thing that has a problem. So we now know that the problem is inside the subroutine make options. And make options is defined right here. Okay, there we go. And it does have a select list item. And the problem is when we go through each option, so item itself will become, item itself should now become 10 and 11, which is a list. And we are trying to select the first item out of 10 and 11.
Should
Sorry?
you add another item and then have from that same list, just to reference index 2? If you go into the parameters for add items, the blue dot there, and add another item, then you can bring another item in and select from get item index number 2.
But that's not what I want to do.
Okay.
I just want, okay, let's switch back to the screen here. So when 9 is selected, 10 should be the only option on the right-hand side. Now when 10 is selected, on the other side, then we have something else to do. But I can't even get to the 10. It has a problem when we try to get to the 10. And the problem that it is reporting, okay, when we got the error, okay, let's undo this part first, because I don't think I need it. The problem that we got is, when we have this block executing, we got a 10 only as item, and we cannot select an item out of just a solid value of 10. Okay, so that might be because the way I initialize the list here. Let me just double check, make sure that everything is done correctly here. Okay, this is 9. 9 is okay. That is why, because this is not reflecting. Okay, let me see if I can, how to superimpose everything so we can see the problem. Okay, this is how I'm initializing. I'm missing one level of lists, because the value of this thing is supposed to be a list of key value pairs. But instead of being a list of key value pairs, it is a single key value pair. So I need one additional level of list to make it work. I'm not creating the option tree itself correctly. The code is right, okay? But this is not done correctly. That is the problem, okay? All right. So now that we have found the problem, the fix is relatively easy, because we just have to add one more, make a list here, but it only has a single item. Okay. Now it is reflecting what it is supposed to be. And we have to do the same thing over here, just make a list, just an empty, make a list out of one single item. That's what we need. So get rid of this, put it here, and the same thing over here. So detach this, use another make a list, but only have one item in the list. And that one single item is by itself a key value pair. And then one more time. Stash it here. There we go. Okay, so now this is really reflecting what the handwritten version is really saying. So let me bring up the handwritten version, which is right here. Okay. So now we are actually having a list. See, this is a list itself here of one key value pair. And over here we have a list of one key value pair. So now the data structure of the list, the way I structure the list is now correct. It is reflecting how it is supposed to be. Okay, so let's go ahead and try it one more time. Build, save APK. go. Just go back and reinstall the app. Go to the emulator, run it again. So we pick 8. It presents the options because of 8. We got 9 and 12 as options. We click 9. Now it's okay. We click 9. It should display 10 as the only option without crashing. If we click on 10, then it's going to have a problem. Because in this case, the second argument for each is not a list. It is a single item, which is just 11. But this is okay, because we know that the last item is going to have a problem. Okay. Are we okay with this? Okay. Okay, so we'll go ahead and finish everything that we do here. In other words, let's see how we can fix that problem. Okay. So we go to swipe list. It is working for the most part. 8 has 2 options, which is 9 and 12. We click on one of those options. And then it redisplays these 2 options, and it would be nice if we can keep the selection. So we'll go ahead and work on that as well, is to keep the selection. So we'll say that, okay, let's pick this one. When we pick 13, okay, now 13 is the key of this key value pair list, but it doesn't have it's not a container. It only got one option here as the only option. So what we need to do is to make that a special case and just say that, okay, this is a special case because we don't really have a list of key value pairs anymore, and then we only have a single choice. So we'll figure out exactly where to make that conditional statement and say that we don't really have a list of options anymore. There's only one option left. This is the end of the whole thing. Okay, so that's why when we click on 13, then it has a problem. Okay, when we click on 13, that's not a problem, but when we select 13, then we have a problem. Okay, so we'll go ahead and fix that problem, and also the other one, which is we want to keep the selection from the right-hand side, so that when we update the left-hand side, the very same thing is going to be selected again. Okay, so we want to make changes to the program to accommodate both of those things. All right, so the first thing first, we want the case when we select 13, 14 is going to be displayed and pretty much automatically highlighted because that's the only option. We don't have anything else that we can select. And then when 14 itself is clicked, we just say, okay, this is the end of everything. We don't have any further options to deal with. Okay, so let's figure out, okay, where do we have the problem in the first place? Is when we try to retrieve this thing here, it is no longer a list of key value pairs. So we have to detect that is a potential, and then when that is a potential, we just say, okay, let's stop here. We don't really have anything else to do. And it has to do with the make options here, because make option is making the assumption that option 3 is a list of key value pairs. So that means before we go through this loop, before we say do for each blah blah blah, before the for each, we have to say, oh, is option 3 really a list? If it is, great. If it is not, then let's do something else. Is that okay? So that's what we'll do, is we'll insert a conditional statement here to basically say in one case we do one thing, and in the other case we'll do something else. Yep.
I keep getting an error message that says that an internal error has occurred.
Okay.
Whenever I try to open up one of the projects.
Okay.
The division.
Let's wait until the lab time. Okay. So we'll finish this first. Okay. So we'll go to lists, and there is an interesting call is a list. Okay. So we'll go to down here. We'll confirm that option 3 is really a list before we try to treat it as a list. Okay, so this is that part. If option 3 is not really a list, but a single particular item, that one single item becomes the result that we're looking for because there's nothing else. So will basically say the result list in this case is really the same thing as option tree itself, because option tree itself is really not a list. It is just a single item. So that should take care of the problem of selecting. Okay, getting back to the whiteboard here. So when we select 13, it should still display 14. But when we select 14, then it's going to throw a fit big time. Okay. So let's test the application again just to make sure that that problem is now resolved. And you can see how I just gradually work on the project. I don't really try to solve all the problems at once, because it's pointless to try to move past a certain point. If I cannot make sure the program works up to a certain point, any coding further than that point is pointless, because that may be changed because of an earlier problem. And we are kind of lucky. Oops. Okay. So we're kind of lucky that we can use this type of what we call it's called RAD, R-A-D. In the past, the term is called RAD, which stands for Rapid Application Development. But these days, people use Agile, to describe this process, which is basically saying interactively or iteratively we can develop the app a little bit, test it a little bit, go back and add some more, delete some, modify the program a little bit, test again, and so on. That is not always the case. In the past, there are other types of models of software development. One is called the Waterfall Model. The Waterfall Model requires people to finish one entire stage, like planning, and then you do the next stage, and then do the next stage, but you don't get back to the earlier one until the thing is released, tested, and you get all the data back, then you can go back to the very first step. So it's a very rigid process, which doesn't lend the process to application, mobile app development. Because mobile apps, tend to require, much quicker changes. Okay, so let's test the program again. 8, select 12, displays, 12. Okay, that other problem has not solved yet. Okay, so 13, is that the last one? Okay, let's check. 13 is not the last one. If I click on 13, it should display 14 as the only option. And it says right here, the operation cannot accept the argument 14. Because 14 by itself is not bad arguments to elements. In other words, I'm trying to set the elements of list view 2, and it is a single element 14, and that's why it is having a problem. Okay, that's okay. I kind of know what the problem is. Okay. I'm supposed to return a list of options, but I'm only returning a single value. That's the problem. So I have to go to list again. This time we make a list of only one item. So we go all the way to the beginning. The second item is make a list. And we only need a list of one single item, which is option tree. That will fix that problem. Let's go ahead and fix the other problem too. The other problem is when list view 2 is, when we click on list view 2, we switch everything in list view 2 to list view 1. But we should also be setting the option based on what is selected in list view 2. So we have to do that here. So we want to set the selection index, in this case, to whatever is the selection index in list view 2. So the other side is going to be the selection index of list view 2, just like that. So this way it is automatically selected. And then we should display the options that we have selected here. So it is almost the same thing as actually clicking something in list view 1, because we're going to use exactly the same code to do that. So we'll put this into my backpack. Go back here. Go to my backpack, pick out this guy, and put it here. And then this block is no longer needed. We just delete it. There we go. All right. So that should do it. Okay. Build one more time. And then there was also a time when you can write your code on punch cards, and then what you do is you submit your punch card to the server room, to the mainframe server room, and then somebody is going to put your punch card through the punch card reader. At some point in time, between now and the next day, run your job, and your job would have some kind of output. So the next day you go back to the mainframe room, the counter, and then the person will give you the printout, which is the result of running your batch job. Okay. So one debug cycle is at least a day, if not longer. We don't have that restriction anymore these days. So let's go back here, re-upload, go back to the emulator, run it one more time, select 8, select 12, see how it is automatically selecting, but it's not highlighting it. This is what I don't like. It's not the same thing as clicking it, because it should have this item already highlighted, and the highlighting part is not working. Okay, 13, select 13, it displays 14, but if I click on 14, then we have a problem. Okay, because it doesn't really have it's not really a key value pair anymore. It's really just a single value. So when we click on 14, it's going to have a problem, because it complains that lookup in pairs cannot accept the arguments, because 14 itself is not even a list itself. So we cannot look up. We're done. All right, but that's okay, because to handle that part is fairly easy. Okay, the problem is coming from here when we try to use the lookup in pairs, because we are assuming the list of numbers is still a list of key value pairs, but it is that's no longer true. Okay, so what we do need to do actually is that where the problem is. Yep, this is where the problem is. It is no longer a list, key value pair list, because list view 1 is okay. So at this point we have 13 and 14. 13, 14 is my list of numbers. We should still be able to do the lookup here. So this is not the block that is complaining. It is this block that is complaining here. So in list view 2, in after picking, if we confirm that a list of numbers is actually a single item, but not even a list anymore, we are all done. Okay, so we should go back and say, yep, we got the final item that we are looking for. So we need a conditional statement here to basically say if list of numbers is no longer a list, we are all done. So we go to control, use another if then else block, not this one. We want to do a just regular if then. Okay, and we'll put an else here, because we just want to reflect that, yep, we got the final item. There's nothing else to do. So we then specify, we check whether the global variable is still a list or not. So we go to here, and you say, and then we say, is the global variable list of numbers still a list? If it is, then everything that we did here is still okay, because we are still in the hierarchy. If it's not, then we are down to a single choice that has no further options available. So in that case, I'm just going to use the notifier and just say that, this is the only choice, we're done. Okay, so we show this as an alert, and basically we can just append or join a string here, and then we can say, you have selected a final option of, okay, and the global variable is really the final option. So we go to variables, we use get to refer to the global variable list of numbers, which is no longer a list anymore. Okay, All right, so that should do the whole thing without the ability to backtrack. But that's a separate thing. We just want to be able to move forward first. Once we can move forward, then we can think about a mechanism so that we can go backwards. Okay, save the file, overwrite, and reinstall. And just run it again. 8, well, let's pick 9 this time. Pick 10, pick 11. It is still looking up the wrong thing, so we're not catching the problem early enough. So when we click this, it is a list view to pick event. So we are talking about this code here. Oh, okay, I take it back. I moved the blocks incorrectly. This has to be outside of the conditional statement. The rest is inside the conditional statement. So let's see if I can just extract this one out. No, it doesn't let me do that. That's fine, I can still do it. It's just a little bit more cumbersome. There we go. So we still want to set the global variable to the options, and then we can report back, whether it's an option or not. So I just reorder the blocks a little bit. That should do it. So once this code is done, I think some of your apps can actually make use of this because it allows you to give your end user a hierarchical tree of choices, so they can narrow down to a particular option in a hierarchical fashion, which is nice, okay? Because you don't have to present your user 100 choices to begin with; they just have to pick options along the way. All right, one more time. 8, 12, and we pick 13, and we pick the 14. You have selected the final option of 14. You got it, okay? All right, so we are out of time today, so I cannot show you the code to do the backtracking. The idea of backtracking is you have to maintain a history of how you drill down to the current level that you're at. Okay? And how do you think we're going to keep track of the history? Sorry? No. List. Exactly. So we have the option list tree, right? So the list tree itself, I'm just going to use a tree representation to represent all the options. Okay? And you can drill down to a particular option. So what we're going to do is we have a history. The history itself is a list. Okay, so we can look at a list as something that has multiple items. The first one is going to refer to the root of the entire thing. So initially, this is basically just the whole thing. But as you make choices, the second item will point to the choice, the result of the first choice, and then the third one will point to the result of your second choice, and then the fourth one will point to the next one, like that. So that means, at any time when you click on a particular button to backtrack, it knows where it has to go back to. And then you can update the list views accordingly. So you can backtrack and say, okay, no, this is not the way I want to go. I want to backtrack a little bit and see the other options. This allows you to go back in time, and based on the history, you can now reinitialize your list view 1 and your list view 2 so that you can go back to earlier options. Okay, but I'm running out of time today, so I can't show you the code to do this. But I can at least show you what kind of blocks would be really helpful in this case. They're all list-related operations, so that you basically know that we have to make use of lists. So the one item that is going to be useful is going to be remove list item is going to be useful, but we'll be removing from one particular end, and we'll be appending to, not appending, we'll be adding. So this is going to be useful, okay, because we are going to be adding items to one particular end. When you add, it's always adding to the end. And we also want to only remove from the end. So that's what we need to do to maintain the history. We will need another global variable called a, we can call it history, which is going to be a list. But that list is interesting because each item of that list is really just pointing to a particular point in the option tree. Okay, so that makes it kind of difficult to understand in a way, but in another way, that's kind of like a really clean way to maintain the history of all the options of all the choices that we have made up to a certain point. Okay, so I'm not going to work on that code anymore today. I want to answer questions related to your project during the lab time. But for those of you who want to kind of continue with this project, let me do this. Okay, let me go ahead and save the Aia file of this thing first. So if you're interested to work on this one on your own, you can do that. So export as an Aia file. And then we go to, okay, I'll put this under advanced topic and advanced techniques, and turn on editing, so this way I can add a link to it. It would be nice if App Inventor can do what Google Document does, which means I can just share the projects with you guys, so you can sign in to your account, but you will see my projects. Then you can just go ahead and say, oh, okay, I'm going to take a look at that one. So we'll add a resource, which is just a file. And the name is a swipe lists. That's the Aia file. Upload. That should be it. Just as a quick survey, is anyone planning to use something like this in your app so that you can have a hierarchy of choices? No? Okay. Did you guys remember, what prompted me to work on this in the first place? To pick out a emotion of a feeling or mood tracking, software. So did you guys okay, let me see if I can still have that picture. Nope. I just want to show you the picture, so this way why I work on this one, or just to remind you why I work on this one. It's an emotion dial or circle. And let's see, let's go to images, find one that is representative. Okay. Dial doesn't work, circle works. There we go. This is a good one. All right, so I want to present, all of these. If you look at the outermost, perimeter, those are the actual words to describe, you know, how somebody is feeling. I want the end user to be able to pick one of those. But if I present all of those in one single list, it's going to be overwhelming, especially if someone is already feeling abandoned, okay? Or someone is, let me see, let's pick a really bad one. Well, I shouldn't say bad, but you know, it's going to impede that person's ability to go through a list of 100 words. Okay. Overwhelmed is a good one. On the left. Okay. But there are other ones too that are really, really good for that choice. It's usually under anger, because anger and fear, you know, those things will drive people not to think rationally.
What about furious?
Yes, that would work. Okay, so if someone is already feeling, you know, furious or, you know, extreme anger, and they're just ready to throw the phone across the room, and now you present them a list of 100 words, and you say, which word best describe your current feeling? Well, ask that wall across the room. That's when you can probably integrate the accelerometer into the app to record the sudden change of, you know, of G-force, and go like, okay, I guess we now know the level of fury of rage that this person is feeling. You can auto-select at that point. And based on the time of the free flight, you can change the level of rage to, you know, if it's longer, you just increase the rage level, because, you know, that means the phone is staying in air for longer. But that's why, okay, yeah, so anytime you have an application where, you know, you are presenting a lot of choices to your end user, but things can still be organized in a hierarchical fashion, that mechanism that we were talking about earlier today can be useful, because you're not going to present 100 choices to overwhelm the end user. You let the user to drill down to the actual choice that is relevant. Okay, I just want to kind of put it in perspective and explain why, you know, something like this may be useful. Okay, you don't have to use it in your project, but if you do, you will finish this code next Monday, so you will actually be able to borrow all the code that I have. Okay. All right, so that's the end of the lecture. I am going to stop the recorder.